Yeah, and I think what if you're looking at the broader picture, if you take even a further step back, and you look at what your long-term business and human capital strategy is, and what are the key capabilities that you need for this business, and kind of proactively preempting those skill sets that you need, you can build them before business needs them. And you can put the programs in place to make sure that the skill set that you need is available at the point where you can predict it to be more or less available. And that's kind of where your strategic workforce planning comes in, or what we spoke about in episode 2 was around how do I then model these things to make sure that I kind of have the skill sets in place when I need it, at the level that I need it. But I think it's always such a big shift for companies moving into these spaces, moving into these kind of capabilities and new ways of working. And the term future of work has been thrown around a lot across many consulting firms and many businesses, and new ways of work, fourth industrial revolution, and all of these terms kind of say the same thing, but a lot of companies actually struggle to adjust to the amount of change that is needed towards a digital strategy. So Janko, how can businesses, or what does change management look like in the new ways of work?
Yeah, I think you're spot on there, JP. If you look at this future of work, technically tomorrow is the future of today's working environment. Really, it is characterized by that, increased pace of change, complexity, ambiguity. So what does change management look like? I don't think change management is the right word. I think it should rather be replaced with change leadership. Because what is change management? Change management is that systematic process, very tactical, operational, transactional process to implement a new system. Will that disappear? No. It will still be there. But it will be an enabler of something that is more important in the future of work, and that is change leadership. And change leadership really is a mindset, it is an outlook of continuous disruption and innovation. It is about leaders and an entire business, not just the change team with comms and stakeholder engagement driving it, but the entire business really having that outlook to be proactive, employee first, and really culture driven. Now, if you have that mindset, yes, there will be continuous change, and you'll employ change management strategies, whether it is the EliteHR or ProSci or whatever the case might be, those things will still have its place. But we need something bigger. We need a continuous mindset. So how can you foster within your organization this type of approach? I think it really starts with a concept that is within change management, but it is taking it to the next level, which is the concept of your change agents. Okay? Now, what do we normally see in change projects? Is you have your change champions, or your super users, or culture champions, whatever you want to call them. You need them. So if you don't have them in your change project, you're setting yourself up for failure. We need them. Okay? So how do we need them in change leadership? Is we need more of them. And we don't just need them for a certain SAP project or a culture change. This should be something that they continuously do. And we've got those people in our businesses. You've got them in your businesses. Identify them. Those are the influential individuals. They're naturally geared to be proactive, to be innovative. Have conversations with them. 24/7, they need to be at the forefront of driving this, at the forefront of asking the questions within meetings. Have we considered this? What about that? We are still doing it the same way. Why are we doing it like that? They need to know that this is the role that they will play in the business. And you need to be a bit mechanistic at the beginning until that becomes unconscious behavior for every single person in the organization. The second thing that I strongly recommend you do is to foster that environment where you're open to change. Where it's okay to try and fail. Now, I know in South Africa we're not very big on that. Our clients that are really groundbreaking and shifting the needle are people that are, and clients that are open to that, leadership groups that are open to change. They will ask the question, what didn't we do today? Okay. What didn't we consider? That'll be coming from a leader. So create that psychologically safe space. Make sure that there's open, compassionate and honest communication practices, and then very importantly is to actually reward innovation. Yeah. And I think a key differentiation here is between invention and innovation. Very often people confuse the two terms, where they will only reward and recognize invention. Invention is coming up with something completely new. Innovation might be a 1% change that have a significant impact at the end of the day. So create that space where you're open, identify those people that will challenge, that will lead from the front. First, start with yourself. Have you be that person. And then reward and recognize. And the key thing as well is put people first. I think very often it's tech and it's this and that, but get people to provide input and really consider what they say so that you foster a mindset. We need a proactive mindset that will ultimately be enabled by what we currently have in the form of change management. So rather, do away with the word change management. Introduce the narrative of being a change leader.
No, definitely. And I think what we always try to do is get change management driven from an HR perspective. We've got a team of change, like you say, change agents or change champions. But it's a business prerogative. It's a business mandate in terms of getting leaders, them to actually demonstrate the behavior that you need them to do from a change perspective. And building a capability from an internal perspective or from a leadership team to then manage change and not actually have resistance from your own leaders around change.
I think a question that many people sometimes then grapple is, how do you measure that? How do you know whether you've been successful? And I think one of the key things that we always see in every big consulting firm's annual report is the sticky point of value add, specifically from an HR perspective. Now, with HR professionals, young emerging industrial psychologists, HR professionals, on the call here, your experience, JP, how do we show that? How do we, as a potential future leader of an HR team, how do you ensure that your HR team operates effectively? And I always prefer the word effective above efficient. You can be very efficient doing the wrong things. It's really about effectiveness, so that there is that value add, that the business really see the value in them.
And I think you're touching on a key point here, and I think it's a much broader business and societal or economical shift. People are moving more towards data and analytics and actually making things transparent and making things visible and making things measurable and actionable. And I think when you're looking at human resources or human capital effectiveness, a key starting point there is getting things onto the table and looking at where the inefficiencies are. And immediately your brain will jump back to process efficiency and let's map all the processes and do a RACI, and then we'll know what we need to do. And then the RACI goes into the closet and then no one sees it for another 2 years. And actually the best way to kind of create efficiency is actually through data visualization, getting things onto a piece of paper. Things are trying to find inefficiencies in the way you work by looking at an Excel sheet with just information becomes such a difficult process. But as soon as you visualize it and make it known and addressable, the quicker it is to find, okay, but there's a problem. Your eyes naturally navigate to pictures and finding where, oh, but there's this spike here. Why is the spike here? What's going on? Oh, there's a lack in data here. Why is this data not here? And I think from an HR effectiveness perspective, a key thing that we're driving now, and we're seeing it in the industry where you see people analytics, data analytics in HR teams, data analysts sitting in HR teams, actually building a capability that they need to effectively tell their stories. And I think a lot of work that HR teams are doing is invisible. Business doesn't know that it's actually happening. And as a team, you're so busy trying to do everything that you're doing and actually not taking the time to sit back and say, okay, but how do we actually tell our story to the world so that they know what we're actually achieving? And a key component to that is data analytics and saying, okay, this is our story. Like if you're driving a key initiative, find out what are those key metrics that we can show how we have made the shift. And I'm not saying go broad, because the broader you go, the more variables become, and people do the normal wrong thing of going for return on investment at a business level. And we can show that we've shifted revenue, and we can show that we've shifted profit, and there's so many variables in place that actually impacts that your message gets lost.
Yeah.
So taking a step back and saying, how can we actually show efficiency in our own environment, tell our own story, and then start moving towards the bigger picture, actually allows HR teams to better and more effectively work. Because ultimately the data we have and the story we tell is not just a story of recruitment. It's not just a story of L&D. It's not just a story of your business partners or your ops environment. It's actually a human capital story. And when you start telling the human capital story, all those different siloed teams actually start working together to represent what our story looks like.
Yeah. And I think I love the simplicity around what you're saying, is make it visible. I mean, it's as easy as that. And if I recall, I think it was in our second episode, we spoke about the concept of data analytics and people analytics, and I reflect back on one of the HR directors conferences that I facilitated, where we had the head of data analytics from Nokia on the call, just sharing the Nokia case study, and his advice was start, just even if it's an Excel. Very often big organizations, I don't have SAP or Oracle, or I don't have Power BI or what. Just do a little graph in Excel, make it visible. And I think it really talks to the essence, as you say, of human behavior. I mean, just think about it. If you drive, okay, you keep your eye on the speedometer, that's more or less fine. Okay, if you're a very conscientious citizen and an upstanding citizen, you're going to stick to 60. But if you drive and you see the speed limit is 60, and there's actually a board playing back your speed to you right there next to the road, and they've done many studies on this, that is when you reduce speed. If you immediately get the feedback from something visible next to it, that's why if you write down your goals, everyone on the call, if you haven't written down your goals, write down your goals. It's proven time and again. Something that is written, something that is visible, informs behavior. So identify those key things, as you say. What is important to you? What is important to the business? In my experience, not enough HR people ask that question to line management is, what is important to you? What can I, we've got this data, how can I package it for you? And then package it.
And I think a key thing there is that I want to touch on is, and immediately people's thought is, let's just visualize everything and see what happens. And with the amount of data available at the moment, you're going to get lost in the data. So sit back first and say, what is the story I want to tell? What is the message I want to get across? Craft that, and then look at, okay, how do I make the data fit that? How do I tell the data? How do I tell my story with the support of data? Rather than just analyzing everything and seeing what pops up and build dashboards and in Power BI and then we digitize and you can now see what we're doing and actually saying, okay, but does that data actually add value? Yes. Otherwise, it just adds noise. It just adds noise and confusion, and it actually makes your audience work to understand your story. Yeah. The easier you can make it for them to think about your story, the easier it is for them to actually buy in. The more they have to work to understand your story, the more disengaged they become, and they don't see the value add that you're adding. And I think with that comes, trying to get the skill set into your business means majority of the time bringing in young people. The younger generation is more involved in data analytics, visualizations. I'm not saying everyone, I'm just saying in general. And trying to keep that skill set once you've developed it becomes so hard because it's such a marketable skill set. Everyone wants data analytics, and especially someone who's got a skill set in human capital for a human capital to become so valuable. So Janko, when we have millennials or Gen Zs, how do you keep them? How do you retain them? Because our traditional retention programs don't work. They don't care about the long-term bonus that's 5, 8, 10 years away. They care about now. So how do we keep them?
Yeah. JP, I'm going to pose this to our audience. Looking at the age groups, the way that they've responded, they will fall in the traditional category, many of them, of being a Gen Z. A few millennials, like us, we're millennials. So I want to open up the conversation, and I want to hear from from the audience. If you want to contribute here, you can just raise your hand, unmute yourself, and participate in the conversation. To JP's point is, what is important to you? What keeps you at an organization? Or alternatively, to flip it around, is what will push you away? So if it is not there, then you will start looking for greener pastures. You can use the chat bar, or if you raise your hand and you want to unmute and participate in the conversation, I encourage you to do so. But let's hear what you say. You're in that category. What keeps you at an organization? Got a hand here from Elizabeth Ross. Elizabeth, you can. I'm going to unmute you, and please do participate in the conversation then. Or you can unmute yourself. Loud and clear. Yes, thanks, Elizabeth. Great, Elizabeth. Thank you very much for that. And I also see a comment coming through here from Marilee Dweta, echoing exactly what you're saying. And that's also been sort of my experience, JP, is that continuous development. I think that's an important thing. I think the dangerous thing is potentially to label people, to stereotype people. I rather talk about the Gen Z, the connected customer, someone that's digitally savvy, etc. So you can see the difference in us now. I'm here with my little flip file. JP's here, his connected customer. I do have mine in my pocket and it's vibrating the whole time. So I don't know what's going to lie in wait, after the session. But that is something that I think organizations need to be really careful about and really conscious about, is about continuous development. It's something that is important to me as an individual. I'm a millennial. We heard from Elizabeth, we heard from Marilee, and I'm quite sure everyone else on the call will echo the sentiment, is that there isn't formal opportunities. And then I sit back and I think, but, look at our clients, big blue chip companies, they've got mature performance management processes, there's IDPs, yet still that is feedback. And I think it's because a lot of times it's seen as a governance exercise. I can vividly recall certain times of here, you walk around your client site, everyone is quickly doing their feedback, their IDPs, they do the plan, and when do you look at it again? Like 2 months before you have to do the next one. So we need to, as HR professionals, really hold managers accountable for the development of their staff. We've got a few great clients. It's actually a management KPI, whether you have developed your people. Have you spent your budget? Okay? Have you created experience, exposure, and education opportunities for your people? So that is one thing that we see as very important, is that continuous development. But it's also aligned to a career path. You said people aren't going to stick around, for the gold watch. You nowadays get a gold watch after 3 years. I think that's the average tenure in the States from what I last 3 years. Okay, we've got one client and the people there 20 years, 25 years. The one oak has been there 51 years. 51 years with one employer. Okay, obviously past retirement now, but he's still adding value. So a key thing is a clear career path. Now, many organizations, it is there, but it hasn't been successfully communicated. The second thing then, what happens is, if you communicate it and you're quite clear on what needs to happen, let's say you want to move from a junior financial accountant to a financial accountant to a senior financial accountant. First thing is, it's not communicated. Second thing, sometimes the what you need to do to progress hasn't been clearly articulated. And then the third thing that sometimes and unfortunately happens is now you meet all the criteria, but you're not moving up. And I think, again, very old school thinking in terms of hierarchical things. I think there's great space for talent mobility. Spoke about that in episode 1 and 2, horizontal expansion. But career pathing is another thing that is important. I want to just check sort of 2 more. I think the second one really is about the concept of feedback. Yes, we've got our masterclass tomorrow. We're going to talk about performance management in a new reality. So please join us tomorrow, 9 to 12 South African time, free online on Zoom, hosted by myself and JP. But feedback cannot just happen once or twice a year. If you're lucky, 4 times a year. It has to be in the moment. That is how we grow. And that is the 10,000 hour rule of Anders Ericsson in his book Peak. If you're a fan of that, read Outliers first to familiarize yourself with it. But unfortunately, Malcolm Gladwell misinterpreted the research by Anders Ericsson. So Anders Ericsson wrote Peak to just set the story straight on the concept of deliberate practice. And that is what we want. We want immediate feedback. So I could be better tomorrow than I was today. Very important as well as flexibility. Okay? So it's important to people. Unfortunately, I think COVID has forced and fast-tracked the movement to a flexible work environment. So that is something that is important. It's about, and I mentioned this in episode 1, the concept of a lifestyle experience. That is how you lift engagement. It's about creating a lifestyle experience. And then just 2 more things that you can also consider. I think we all have a very an entrepreneurial spirit. So we saw the rise of the concept of intrapreneurship, so inside an organization. A lot of millennials, Gen Zs have got side hustles, things on the side that is important to them. Rather create that space, channel that energy inside. Post-it notes from 3M came from free time. Gmail, G Drive at Google came from free time. So create a space inside. And then lastly is embrace technology. Okay? I very often see that you get employed by an organization, and outside of the organization, you've got a MacBook Pro, unlimited data, unlimited storage, and now all of a sudden you get this, this old school laptop. I'm not going to name any brands. This laptop with a 5 meg memory. I mean, you can't even send an emoji. How's that enabling? Okay. Create a space where you actually and ultimately embrace technology. I just see some comments coming through here. I want to have a look at that.
While you get into the comments here, I think it's also, and to touch on the topic of development, I think if you had to use an example of on-demand experiences like you get with Netflix, and I know everybody's talking about Netflix, and I think everybody's familiar with it. It's kind of you create your journey in Netflix, and by you giving them data, they kind of give back to you what would resonate with you. So I think on the one side, we need to create those career paths that allow people to progress, but then also allow them to create learning that then they can navigate by themselves and kind of create a library of content that kind of fits towards their space. So if I now work through my learning content, and the normal thing that happens is I have a learning catalog, and someone says, I want to know what you offer, and I send them a 1,000-row sheet of all the learnings that we have available, and I go and choose. And immediately the barrier of me having to go and read that Excel sheet of 1,000 learning offerings just immediately puts me off.
Yeah.
So yes, create those career paths, but also to a certain extent guide people. So create an environment, and there are systems that allow you to do this where it kind of learns with you and understands you. And as you develop your understanding, your skill, and where you want to go, when you've developed that understanding of where you want to go, the career path's there. It gives you guidance in terms of where you want to go and how you want to develop and what's my steps that I need to take to get there.
Yeah.
And also just not having career paths that are a single ladder. Vertical career paths into different areas, building competencies and capabilities that allow you to be mobile and be able to shift.
Spot on. I think some of the comments that come through here is about wanting to be challenged.
Yep.
Okay, so that's a personal mantra as well. You grow outside your comfort zone. And it sometimes takes a certain leader style to really encourage a person to do that. We have comments here coming through around team collaboration, so that ability to work together, good communication, support for growth, as you've said, JP.
And I think a key thing that also came out from COVID now is that teamwork and connectedness. I think, and you guys will see a lot of research that's been put out now around the mental impact and the mental health around being isolated at home and not being able to have that connection and engaging with people and kind of connecting with that. And we actually had it in, I think, episode 2 or 1, where we spoke about kind of how do you foster and create engagement and connectedness with employees and your team members in a virtual environment.
I think another comment here, Murray, thank you very much for raising this. It's also about speaking the language. Okay, we all say the HR should speak business language. Okay, but we also need to speak the language of our employees. To an extent, what do they value? What is important to them? And we won't know if we don't ask. And I think we spoke about that when we spoke about wellness and employee engagement and your EVP. You find out by really asking people. And I think one thing that you already touched on now, JP, is that traditional way of the learner catalog, etc. We need to develop people differently. I think very importantly, as well as leaders and leader styles, has to be different. So, in your experience, what does a leadership development program, or how does leadership development look like in this new world of work?
And I think it's such a key skill set, and I'm kind of going to talk about kind of like a little journey in terms of, leadership development. I'm not going to talk about 1980s, but like the initial thought about leadership development is we have leaders at different levels, and we give them a course and we isolate them, we take them away out of the workplace, and we put them into a classroom and we teach them everything they need to know, and then we put them back into the workplace and we say, okay, good luck, see you at the end of the year with a performance review, hope everything goes well. And I think a lot of progression has been made around realizing that doesn't work. A lot of progression has been going into more on-the-job experiences, and that's where the Harvard Business Review's 70-20-10 principle came from development, 70% on-the-job, 20% coaching and mentoring, and 10% formal. And then we started developing leadership programs that are level-based, so I give the skills to the supervisors, the middles, and the seniors, and that started formulating a bit better. And then we started saying, okay, but we need to apply this practically in a kind of a safe environment. So that kind of came in with action-based learning programs, where we give them a project or an assignment. Where I see it kind of moving next is network-based teams. This has been discussed a lot. You can go and read up around adaptive org. And the idea behind this is to say that, okay, we've got these on different levels, and normally the ALPs or the actual-based learning would be on that level, but then your delivery of your problem solving is at that level, and you're not actually taking into account the full spectrum of it. So a key change or shift now is looking at, okay, ALPs across the board. So in your network-based team, you've got a senior manager in there, you've got a middle manager in there, you've got a junior manager in there, you've got a specialist or a knowledge contributor in there, and you kind of create a network-based team that's like a microcosm of what the business is really like. Because if you take them only leaders and you go and develop them, their thinking and their way of approaching the problem is at a leader level. But if you start throwing in a junior manager, a middle manager, a senior manager, a specialist in there, the thinking and the quality of thinking becomes so much better and so much more whole in terms of solving the problem than just at a specific level or a leader versus a specialist. Actually putting them into the same team, creating network-based teams, and actually having them navigate through the business, solving those problems, and bringing it back and understanding, okay, if we had to just think about this problem across the board, from strategic to operational, you've got someone in that team to help you kind of articulate that message and where you're going.
Love that. And I think it's actually so on, where are we now? Thursday, on Wednesday rather, we launched a leadership development journey program at a client where that's exactly the approach that we're following, co-created with the CEO and insisted on by the CEO. So really we need to commend him also for that. It is about executive and senior management at this point in time, but it's cross-functional. It is people who've been in a leadership position in this organization for 10 years, who's been there for 2 months, and it really is about the work-based assignments. It's exco members from various functions, operational managers from various functions, having to work together to solve business challenges. Yes, so sometimes you still need to, I think, have that knowledge sharing approach where this is the framework for how you do this, or this is the framework for how you do that. But it is really, as you say, getting people together in a team environment, different functions, working together to solve a business challenge. And I think one thing that I also stress there is where we said that, look, if you feel that this is something that you're doing over and above your work, you are focusing on the wrong things in your day job.
Exactly.
Because this is what you should be doing. We're running another program at another client where the assignments are certain things that they should be doing on a daily basis. And the challenge that they say, oh, we don't have time for this, and the push, like, but you should be doing this. There should not be something that you're doing over and above. Okay, this assignment is what you paid for. The fact that you're not doing it just tells me that you're focusing on completely the wrong thing. So that action-based learning is so important. I really love what you're saying there, in terms of that network of teams, keeping that sort of that leader culture alive within an organization.
And I think the key focus shift is shifting away from a training program to I'm giving you a safe environment to experiment in. I'm giving you a safe environment to try stuff. And it's not going to impact your job. It's not going to impact the overall delivery. It's not going to impact your day-to-day work. But within this team, within this project, and within this environment, I support you. And this is such a key and critical opportunity to bring in mentors, to bring in people who are outside of this team, to kind of give them that objective view of, listen, you guys are completely on the wrong track. Think of this, think of that, maybe pivot, maybe shift, or you are completely on the right track, keep going, giving in that support, bringing in senior leadership to kind of play that role, and actually having them see what the team's busy with. And ultimately, if you're bringing in design thinking, and you're bringing in shorter intervals between playing it back to business and playing it back to your customers, the quicker response time and adjustment you can have. And then ultimately, you're not waiting for a November, December presentation where the business problem has already been solved and moved on from, and your team's presenting super excited, and actually the business is like, well, we solved this already 2 months ago.
Yeah. No, I think that that mentorship role is also so important. So if you're not yet there in your organization, where you have got these network of teams, then at least start interlinking with different level programs, as you've said. If you've got a senior leader program and a mid and a junior, interlink them by using mentorship approaches, where this level is involved as a mentor here, this one is involved as a mentor here. At least then, start with that, because it's important for people to have that type of exposure. And by doing that, just a little practice that you introduce there, at least then, you're creating that sort of leader culture within your organization.
No, definitely. And you invest so much time in your leaders and kind of creating the same language, the same narrative, the same approach, the same competence, and normally you kind of create a leadership culture around that. But inevitably people leave. Inevitably people resign. Inevitably people go on to new chapters in their life. You bring someone new in and they haven't gone through that whole journey. They haven't gone through the same experiences and the troubles and the challenges. So how do you maintain that leadership culture when your leaders leave and new ones come in?
Yeah, it's inevitable, as you say. People will move on, and there's always this anxiety that is within a system. Once a leader leaves. So a couple of practical things, that you can consider. I think the first one that I would recommend is, if that is the case, the existing leaders need to dial up their presence. Okay? Many reasons for that. The first is to show consistency, to calm the system. Also, they will then act as a custodian of desired behavior for a new leader coming into a system. So a great opportunity for an existing leader to step up, be a bit more visible until such time where this person really has been acclimatized to the system and know what is desired. In order for them to do that, you need to double down on your values. Okay? Make sure that what is important to you as an organization, that is part of every single conversation. Okay? Because remember, your culture is not just the leader culture. Yes, they do have an impact, but your culture is a sum of all the member strengths. So be clear as well on what works for you, what made you successful. Focus on that. Focus on driving your values. Be clear on when that person comes in that they also know what is expected and what is non-negotiable practices. This is the way we do things around here. If you're not clear on that, it's going to be very difficult for you to really take them through a sufficient leader onboarding program so that they can fulfill the role apologies, of a leader in your business. Communicate clearly, to deal with that anxiety in an organization, full transparency. This is why the person left, this is what will happen, this is the new leader, this is where they come from. Create a system where they've got an opportunity to engage one-on-one, hold town halls where they sort of, where people get to know them as a person. I think that's a key thing as well, is really introduce them well into the business. And very importantly, and lastly, is to have that feedback loop, where people can share. Ultimately, you want to get to a point where it's not anonymous. Many organizations in South Africa are not yet to that level of maturity, but create that platform where if there's a new challenge that the system is experiencing because of the leader behavior, that they can provide feedback. And that they can then see that existing leaders actually act on that feedback. I think that's an important thing. So to summarize there, existing leaders dial up their presence, double down on your values, create two-way communication channels, and communicate clearly with employees as to the reasons for a new leader coming into the organization. And very importantly is hold true to what is important to you, to what made you successful from a culture perspective.
Definitely. And I think the key thing is that leader onboarding. I think normally that is the first touch point of a leader coming into a new business. It's the first experience, it's the first engagement, and that leader onboarding is your first opportunity to position the leader culture in front of your new leader. Because a lot of people, they come into a business, there's no necessarily leader-specific or manager-specific onboarding, it's kind of general employee onboarding.
Yeah.
And the first interaction they have with other leaders is they kind of learn the bad behaviors, they learn the things that you don't want them to learn. And bringing them in and actually using that first opportunity to paint the foundation of what you want, to already set the compass, will guide them through what are the things I actually need to adopt and what are the things I should actually stay away from.
Spot on. I think such a valuable point that JP makes here. Don't just have your onboarding into your functional role. You need to have a parallel process and to onboard as a leader. And I think also to onboard as a manager. I think that's a key failure of many onboarding programs, is not to onboard a manager once a person has been promoted into a managerial role. Great specialist, okay, you lead that team of developers. How do I do that? So a core component that is necessary is leader onboarding into, whether it's from outside or from the inside. That is unfortunately, again, all that we have time for. Time flies. Once you are having fun, I had great fun this evening. Again, you can recall that in episode 2 we gave away 2 spot prizes. We want to maintain that rhythm. So JP, I'm again going to ask you to shoot with a number between 1 and 30. Let's go straight for the middle, 15. Number 15 on the list that I have here is Marley Botha. And I think Marley also participated and contributed on the call. So Marley, from Human Interest to you, a 500 Rand gift card at Exclusive Books. In order to register, you had to provide your email address, so we will be in contact with Marilee Botha to share that with you and buy a book of your choice. Book because I love reading and I think it's important that we all read. So I only thank you for joining and for being present tonight. Otherwise, you have forfeited your spot prize. So I'll be in touch on that. And then, secondly, I want to encourage and invite all of you to attend our Elite HR Masterclass tomorrow. It's a new component to the Elite HR solution that we're introducing. Tomorrow's session, 9 to 12, SA time, will focus on performance management in a new reality. So if you haven't received the mail that I sent a bit earlier today with the link to register, please drop me a note on LinkedIn. I'm happy to share that. And we'll also be in touch on the next topic. The masterclass is similar to tonight's session, will be facilitated on a monthly basis as per the topics and questions that is then ultimately posed by our Elite HR community. From my side, thanks a lot for your time this evening. If you were watching on YouTube, thanks a lot. Hit that subscribe button. Connect with myself and JP on LinkedIn. Follow Human Interest on LinkedIn. Excited to share more of what is coming in the Elite HR space. JP, once again, it's great to spend some time with you this evening, and look forward to the next sessions.
Thank you everyone for joining, and I hope to see you guys in the next session. Submit those questions. We always like seeing what you want to know about, what you want to learn about, and it gives us an opportunity to also just reflect on our learnings, reflect on what we've been through. It also helps us learn. So it'll be nice. Go in, register, submit your questions for the next sessions, and we'll help to or try to get to all of them.
Yeah, I think as your comments came through, you said you like to be challenged. We like to be challenged as well. Okay, so don't just submit straightforward questions. Challenge us. I mean, just before the session, JP shared some thinking that he's doing around, in my opinion, groundbreaking remuneration models. So that's potentially something that we can also throw into the mix. I think he's far ahead of his time in South Africa with that type of thinking. So please do challenge us. Thanks a lot. Stay safe, stay warm. Thank you.
Thank you.